Well, I will start like giving the thanks to Cervantes and to the Ramón Llull, and of course to Julia and Eva to be here, to Gonzalo to coordinate this event. Welcome to this new session of IWOL. And nothing else. Thank you to Ernesto also to be behind the scenes, doing all the organization of the event. So thank you, Pedro. And we are going to have our next IWOL event next week on the 29th. We are going to have Fatima Bhutto presenting her book Come Alberi. So also, to all the people that's now in this session, if you want to join, you are more than welcome. And Gonzalo, I give you the word. You're like you're the next.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll start by, well, I'm Gonzalo Iturregui, okay, and I'd like to thank all the people joining us today for this event in which we are presenting the translation into English of the Catalan book Permafrost in the English title by Eva Baltasar and translated by Julia Sanches in the publishing house And Other Stories. And this was launched the last 6th of April. So I'd like to say, first of all, that we are recording the session. That's why your cams are off and your microphones are also muted. But at the very end of the conversation, you'll have 15-20 minutes to ask questions. And if you have any questions during the conversation, you can write them directly on the chat and we'll get back to them at the very end. All right, so I'd like to say thanks also to Eva and Julia for being here, and I'm going to introduce them after. But first of all, we have with us the director of the Instituto Cervantes, Manchester and Leeds, Pedro Eusebio, Marc Dueñas, head of the London office of the Institut Ramón Llull, and the representative of the publishing house And Other Stories, Nicola Smalley. So if you'd like to say some words before getting into the conversation.
Good evening to all. It is a great pleasure to be with you today for the presentation of this book, launching in Spanish, which had a very great success in Catalan, which was the original language. I would like to thank also Marc Dueñas, the director of the Ramón Llull Institute in London, the lecturers from the University of Leeds, Gonzalo Iturregui and Maria Bastianes, the writer Eva Baltasar and the translator Eva Sanches, and also Nicola Smalley from the editorial And Other Stories. This event is very important for us because in no very easy situation, we have been, all of us, on more than 1 year now in the pandemic, we have been able to organize together with the University of Leeds and Ramón Llull Institute this book launch in Britain, and this is part of what continued work that we led in the Instituto Cervantes in promoting the Catalan culture and literature. It is a long path. I remember many years ago when I met Carmen Riera in Tangiers when I was working there almost 20 years ago. And it's a continuous work that had been also formalized in 2020. The Instituto Cervantes, Ramón Llull Institute, the Consello da Cultura Gallega and the Excerpts Euskal Institutua signed an agreement for the promotion of the different cultures that are part of Spain, and also to promote especially the language Castilian, Catalan, Galician, and Basque. So this event is part of this together work. And let me, although we are presenting the book afterwards, that for me, this book has been something that has made me very thoughtful, because it has a very direct and not very baroque writing in the, we could say, a bit in the style of Josep Pla, but at the same time, it evokes a lot of questions and a lot of thoughts about our life, our everyday problems, and the matters that are considered in the book. So I would like to congratulate the author, Eva Baltasar, for this great book. I enjoyed it a lot, and I will wish you a great success that you have already had with this book in Catalan. So thank you very much to all of you for being there. And I hope this will be the first of many book launches with you, Eva, in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us this evening. I will just tell a few words, just to remember that this book was, when it was first published in Catalan, it was a literary surprise. It was a word of mouth book, and this is also something that it makes me quite happy, because when a book has an unexpected success, this is also something that people who are working promoting books and that are trying to plan every step for the promotion, when there's this kind of surprises, it's something that it's also something very enjoyable, as Nicola Smalley can tell for sure. And that just to remind you that this book is part of a trilogy. The second book, Bulda, has been also published in Catalan first, and then in Spanish. And the third one, Mammoth, is going to appear quite soon, I think. And also just to remind you that, well, this book, it's now published in English, but it has been published before also in Spanish, in French, in Italian, in Galician, and now in English. Well, as part of the Institut Ramón Llull, I'm very happy to be able to support the international promotion of this book and other books from Catalan literature. It's really a pleasure to be able to have the resources and the human team to support these new novels, poetry, drama, non-fiction works that come out from Catalonia along the last years, not just contemporary literature, but also modern classics. And well, in this case, very happy to be together this evening with all of you, especially Ernesto Gomez, who have organized all the events, and Gonzalo, who will present it today. And well, just thank you, all of you. I mean, of course, first of all, Eva and Julia for participating as speakers, as our main guests, but also to Another Stories, also for the International Writers Program in the University of Leeds and Maria Bastianes. And then, of course, the Instituto Cervantes in Manchester. Gracias, Pedro Eusebio, por todo el apoyo. And then I also enjoyed reading this book a lot, and I also hope that all UK readers that read the book also will enjoy that much. Thank you very much, and just go ahead. Thank you.
I'm going to be super quick, but I just wanted to say thank you, Eva, for writing such a wonderful book, and thank you, Julia, for doing such an amazing job of translating it. And thank you to you, Institut Ramón Llull and Instituto Cervantes. It's really great that we could have this event against all the odds of Eva being in Catalonia and Julia being in Rhode Island. It's great to kind of be here without being here with you. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to first present our two speakers or protagonists of this event today. First of all, Eva Baltasar, who is an award-winning writer and poet. In 2018, she publishes Permafrost in English, with great success among the public and critics. She was awarded the Llibre D Award, awarded by Catalan librarians to the best book of the year, and was shortlisted for the Prix Medici Étranger. Its translation rights have been sold for its translation into 8 languages so far. And Permafrost, as Mark has said, is the first part of this triptych of by female protagonists, followed by Boulder and Mammut. And we have the translator here as well, Julia Sanches, who translates from Portuguese, Spanish, and Catalan, and Another Stories, a publishing house. She has translated from all 3 languages, from Portuguese, Now and the Hour of Our Death by Susana Moreira Marquez, from the Catalan Permafrost by Eva Baltasar, and from the Spanish Slash and Burn by Claudia Hernandez, for which she won a Penheim Award. She has also translated works by Noemi Jaffe, Daniel Galera, and Giovanni Martins, among others. So we have here like huge professionals with us. And I'd like to start by reading the first sentence in the synopsis of the English version, which I think really captures for me like the essence of Permafrost. So Permafrost, no bullshit lesbian narrator, is an uninhibited lover and wickedly funny observer of modern life. I have to say personally that I loved the book as well as Boulder, and I cannot wait to read Mammut. And what I did from interviews, from you know, critics and articles, I just put together a series of questions, and I tried to mix them a little bit to ask about the translation, to ask about the writing, and some questions are for both of them. Okay, so I'd like to start with Eva, my first question. So you have a long experience in poetry. You are a poet, first of all, but you've mentioned that your poetry is very confessional. So you write from your I, and that prose was kind of your method to kind of distance yourself from yourself, basically. So where was Permagel born?
Hola, bueno, gracias. Ernesto, encantada de estar aquí, invitada. A ver, la pregunta concreta, te he seguido muy bien.
Sí.
La pregunta concreta es...
On neix Permagel? Quina necessitat fa néixer Permagel?
Sí, no había una necesidad clara. Yo llevaba 15 años escribiendo y publicando poesía. Creo que me he formado como escritora escribiendo poesía. Y en un momento dado me encontré un día con problemas existenciales, creía que muy grandes, sentada en la consulta de una psicóloga contándole mi vida. Y al cabo de una hora, la psicóloga me dijo que me veía una persona muy desestructurada y me recomendaba que fuera a casa, hiciera un pequeño ejercicio, y se trataba de en 4 páginas escribir mi propia biografía. Yo empecé, le hice caso, empecé a escribir y me di cuenta enseguida de que me aburría, de que mi propia biografía ya me la sabía. Igual contándola era desestructurada, pero yo ya tenía muy claro cómo era mi vida. Y me di cuenta que empezaba a introducir pequeñas mentiras para hacer más interesante la lectura de mi propia vida a la terapeuta. En ese momento decidí parar ahí el experimento, que me estaba divirtiendo por una cuestión de honestidad, creo, profesional sobre todo, para con la terapeuta, la psicóloga, pero me había dado cuenta que había descubierto una voz de mujer que ya no estaba contando mi vida, sino que estaba fabulando a partir de mi propia vida, que me había seducido muchísimo. Ahí está la semilla de Permafrost. Paro aquí para que puedas...
Okay, so Permafrost was born out of no necessity. She had been 15 years writing poetry, and that's how she kind of trained herself to write prose. And then she started, well, she was writing about existentialist things or topics. And then she found herself in front of a psychologist telling her life. And then the psychologist said, like, you seem a very non-structured person, right? So why don't you write your biography in 4 pages? And she realized she started to get bored of her own biography and started to put some lies to make it different, right? And so she stopped that for the therapy, obviously, to be honest with the therapies. But she realized that with this kind of invention, she was discovering this new voice of a woman, which was very attractive and seducing. And that's how Permafrost started. So thank you very much. I'd like to ask you, Eva, as well, about the title of the book.
Sí. Permafrost era una palabra que yo aprendí viendo reportajes sobre geología que me encantan, y es cierto que en aquel momento escribía solo poesía, me parecía una palabra de una gran fuerza poética como metáfora, y pensé, igual algún día voy a escribir un poemario y este va a ser el título. La palabra, yo nunca apunto nada, no he sido esos escritores que van apuntándolo todo, pero lo que me queda en la mente me queda y lo que no, pues se va y ya está. Y sí que es cierto que escribiendo la novela, el Permafrost, en un momento dado, aún no tenía título, pero sí que la protagonista usa la palabra, ¿no? Está hablando en primera persona y dice algo parecido a se me resquebraja el permafrost. Y en el momento en que yo vi esa palabra ahí en el ordenador escrita, pensé, ya está, es que es el título, porque para mí es una metáfora muy exacta de lo que es la protagonista, ¿no? Que es esta mujer que tiene como esta capa de hielo o de tierra helada que la protege y a la vez la protege y la aísla también de un exterior que ella percibe en una sociedad como algo agresivo para ella.
Mm-hmm. Genial. So the title comes, well, the word appeared in one of these documentaries, geology documentaries, and she just, got the word in her head, and the word had this very poetic strength, a very big poetic strength, and she thought, why I'd like to use that for the title of a poem collection, but it just remained in the mind of Eva. And then when she was writing the book, there's one sentence in which the protagonist, she uses the word permafrost as this metaphor of this layer of ice that recovers her. And then she thought, like, that's going to be the title of the novel. And the metaphor, it's very nice because it resonates perfectly with the character of the protagonist, which is this layer of ice that protects, but at the same time is isolating the protagonist from society, which she perceives as very hostile. Okay, so thank you very much. And then the last question, well, for now, for you is, the book is a part of this trilogy or triptych. Was Permagel born alone or accompanied?
Sí, él nació sola. La novela nació sola. De hecho, yo hice una primera redacción, no sabía que sería una novela hasta que la terminé y entonces me dediqué unos meses a trabajar el lenguaje de manera poética, que es tal como yo me gusta trabajar el lenguaje, tal como me relaciono con mis obras. Y al terminar me lo había pasado tan bien durante ese año y medio. Había logrado una compañía, esa voz, esa protagonista, para mí fue una compañía muy grata durante todo este tiempo, que decidí, en unos segundos de iluminación que tuve, decidí que iba a escribir 2 novelas más que formarían parte de un tríptico, y me vinieron también los títulos, eran Boulder y Mamut, que para mí son 2 metáforas también muy exactas de 2 protagonistas que no tenía en mente aún, pero que sabía que irían por aquí, que una sería muy piedra, muy boulder, una piedra aislada, expuesta a las inclemencias del tiempo, y la otra sería un animal prehistórico capaz de soportarlo todo y con un peso biológico importante. Entonces fue como una iluminación, una revelación, ¿no? Y ese proyecto de una novela construida y 2 como proyecto fue el que presenté a mi editorial madre, digamos, a Club Editor, y que se interesaron por el proyecto entero.
Okay, thanks. Permafrost was born alone. She wrote the first manuscript, and then she devoted quite a lot of time to kind of polish all the style, rhythms, and so on and so forth of the text. And she found in this process a very nice company, right? And she really enjoyed that process and thought, I'm going to write 2 more novels. And the title of these 2 novels, Balta and Mahmoud, are both also metaphors related to the protagonists of these 2 books. The one is rock, isolated, exposed to, you know, all the challenges, let's say, in the climate. And then the second one, Mahmoud, this prehistoric animal, which, kind of is resistant to everything. So with Revelation in mind, so these 2 more titles, she presented this like 3-phase project to this publishing house, and they were happy with them, and that's what she has been working on in the last years, right? Okay, so thank you. Now, I have a question for both of you, and I'm going to start with Julia, because I think it's very nice to know, like, from the outside and then from the inner side. So from the outside first and then from the inside. So I identify a lot of topics in the novel. Okay, so very powerful and interesting topics. We talk about death, we talk about lesbianism, the passing of time, fear, life, depression. For you, Julia, what are the topics, the main topics of Permafrost?
Oh God, I think you've just gone and named them all. I think the body for me was important. I was really attracted to how beautifully Eva writes about female bodies in ways that are sexual but not sexualized. Humor, the way she manages to turn something dark and frightening to something absolutely hilarious, but without ever being disrespectful. Love, modern life, definitely. And the way any person, but also women, have to navigate a variety of expectations that are sort of projected onto them without any real input from themselves sometimes. Is that okay?
Yeah, very interesting. And Eva, what do you think?
Los temas de la novela, es que para mí es muy difícil pensar en temas, porque yo no empiezo a construir la novela, no sé lo que voy a escribir, lo que necesito es encontrar una voz. Y mis protagonistas, al menos en el tríptico, sí que actúan a modo de espejo de mí misma. Entonces, yo, sin estar contando mi vida, estoy exponiéndome, ¿no? Y estoy exponiendo esos temas que igual ya se encontraban, bueno, igual no, seguro, en mi poesía, y que son mis intereses. Es cierto, como decía Julia, el cuerpo, cómo ese vivir a través de un cuerpo, ahora mismo, un cuerpo de mujer y de un cuerpo de mujer que se siente lesbiana, pero también la familia, la maternidad y el miedo. El suicidio, por ejemplo, a mí nunca, te diría, es un tema de la novela, yo te diría, no, pero es cierto que sí que ha sido etiquetada, ¿no? Una novela que habla sobre el suicidio. Bueno, es que yo no creo en la muerte, digamos, vida y muerte forman parte todo de lo mismo. Creo que en el centro hay esa incomodidad de vivir en sociedad. Creo que la protagonista es una mujer que transita un poco por la periferia, por los límites Es una mujer rodeada de personajes que se automedican con ansiolíticos o antidepresivos para soportar la vida. Ella se niega a hacerlo y mantiene esa mirada lúcida sobre la realidad. Pero esto hace que la sufra muchas veces y ese sufrirla hace que fabule con la idea de suicidio, que en el libro tiene un componente estético muy importante también.
Vale. All right. So, no, it's okay. So, so it's very difficult to talk about the topics in the novel because when she starts writing, she doesn't know how this is going to go, and she sees the text as a mirror where she is reflected. So without actually telling us her life, she is exposing her topics or the topics she is interested in. So she names some of them. So the body of a woman who considers herself or sees herself as a lesbian, then family, maternity, then suicide. Okay, this is one of the I'd say the key topics attached to Permafrost. And then life and death, but as a cycle. She says she doesn't believe in this kind of duality, but as a part of the same thing. And then she summarizes everything as the uncomfortability of living in the current society. So this woman, the protagonist, actually navigates the margins of this in this society, and she's surrounded by all these characters who self-medicate, but she maintains this, let's say, healthy. Healthy side of things, so without drugs in between, but she suffers a lot. She suffers a lot, and she sees suicide as something aesthetic. This is something repeated in the novel. Yeah, I think that was it, the whole explanation. Now this next question, if you don't want to add anything else, voleu afegir alguna cosa about this? Okay. So Julia, how do you reach to Permagel? How do you arrive to Permagel? And what did you think the first time that you got immersed in the novel? And has this relationship changed from the beginning of the translation to the very end of the whole process?
Muted myself. So I came to the novel through the agent, actually, Bernat, who works with Club Edito, and other stories, who sent me the PDF, and I read it in a single afternoon. And I think, I mean, one of the topics that I forgot to mention, which is quite important, is that language itself is an enormous theme of the book. And I was just completely enamored with the language. I couldn't get enough of this particular way of looking at the world through words, and like the way Eva sort of casts light on and draws different metaphors out of the world we look at every day, if that makes any sense. And I suppose my relationship with it has changed because now I've read the book like 20 times, and it's really gotten under my skin. And I've maybe not spent 1.5 years living with Eva's with the protagonist, now Boulder as well. But I feel like I've spent an enormous amount of time in their company. So it feels very familiar in a way that it didn't when I first read it. When I first read it, the book, it was new and exciting, and now it's still exciting, but it's not new. It's an old friend.
It's interesting. It's interesting. And do you think this kind of translation, so the translation of poetry, and I know you've won some awards for poetry, for the translation of poetry, right? So do you think this kind of translation presents a greater challenge, and was Permagel a challenge?
Yes. it was very difficult to translate. I think, so this is something I'm still developing, but I feel like there's this tension when you're translating prose by a poet like Eva, who writes her prose as though it were poetry. She doesn't sort of change. I feel like there isn't a huge change to the way the writing works, to the sort of logic between the words. It's still heavily rhythmic and heavily metaphorical. And so applying a sort of poet's logic to prose is difficult, because when I'm taking her words into English, the rhythm changes, the connection between the words changes, but you still have to find a delicate balance between them, where you're retaining the poetry, but also making the prose move forward and make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because you still need a sort of, I suppose, structural sense to what's going on. And so that was very challenging, because the music is so different in Catalan and English. Yeah, so you really have to be playful, which I hope I've been in this translation.
Okay, yeah, well, I'd like to say that you have the translator's note in the English version where you discuss these matters about rhythm, about making the prose, moving forward, but with that making sense and maintaining the final message. I think something incredible. To be honest, I've been reading the English translation, and I think it's so difficult, so difficult. But I think really managed to kind of gather everything that Eva wants to transfer to the reader. Connected to that, I'd like to, because Eva, you've mentioned that the way you wrote Permafrost was first the whole story, and then you pass a lot of hours working with the language, the style, making it, polishing as a structure or a painting, and that this is one of your favorite parts in the process of writing. So that's my question. Does the story comes always first, or sometimes was the other way around? So poetry, the sound first, and then you write a story?
No, en cada libro creo que es distinto. En el caso de Permafrost, yo primero escribí la novela más a nivel argumental, ¿no? La historia, y al terminar y ver que sí que era una novela, pensé, ahora voy a trabajarla, voy a trabajar el lenguaje, ¿no? De forma poética. Esto quiere decir, igual decir en 3 frases algo que estaba escrito y ocupaba una página y media, y buscar imágenes, buscar ritmo, musicalidad, que eso sí que es un reto en traducción, sobre todo, creo yo, ¿no? Mantener el ritmo y la musicalidad y el peso poético, que es una novela breve, pero que tiene esa complejidad, ¿no? Y en cambio, en el caso de Boulder, como ya sabían que iba a ser una novela, el trabajo lo he ido trenzando simultáneamente. Es decir, se ha ido saliendo el argumento, digamos, y he ido trabajando a diario también el lenguaje, que es algo, como ya he dicho y tú has repetido, que me llena muchísimo, que es lo que casi más gozo, aparte de la compañía de esa protagonista, y que he querido que formara parte del proceso de redacción de la novela desde el principio. Y en Mamut, que también estoy ya terminándola, se ha dado así también.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so she says that the process in Permafrost and the 2 other novels was different. With Permafrost, she first wrote the kind of argument, the story, because she didn't know what Permafrost was going to become, right? So then when she knew, okay, this is going to be a novel, she started working with the language. So in some cases, 3 phrases substituted 1.5 pages, and then she managed to apply this rhythm, musicality, and this poetic weight, which make it so complex, the text, this complexity. In the case of Boulder and Mahmoud, since she knew from the very beginning that these 2 texts were going to become novels, she did it in this complementary process in which she wrote the story and at the same time was working with the language and the style. I'd like to ask Julia, how is your process for the translation?
Sorry, I keep muting myself. I have cats and they meow. My process was sentence by sentence. I think I worked faster on Permafrost than I would have liked to create a first draft. And then I revised it a million times. And then I got edits from the editor on the project and also revised based on their edits. But I kept in mind something that I think Maria Boigas had told me at a lunch that we had, where she said that during the editorial process, Eva would be like, fine, change this word, but it needs to fit the rhythm. So I was always very, very conscious of the rhythm of each sentence. But there's also it's a very sort of funny voice. And if you're too attached to the poetry of it in English, you might lose the humor, in part because, I mean, English has Latinate words, the same Latinate words that you might have in Catalan, but we don't use them the same way. So you have to be, I guess, make it more English and make it more contemporary, because there's also the fact that it is happening. It doesn't say specifically when it's happening, but it's now-ish. And with Boulder, which I just turned in last week, I already knew what I was getting into, in the sense that Eva knew that Boulder was going to be a novel, so she worked the poetry and the structure at the same time. By this point, I felt like I understood Eva's writing better. And so when I went into translating the second novel, I knew how free I could be in certain parts. And it's also very different. Like, every paragraph in Boulder feels extremely solid and contained, and almost like a stanza in a way that Permafrost is looser. And so, sorry, I'm like already fast forwarding into the future, but
it's okay.
I guess what I'm saying is I've learned from translating Eva what I learned from Permafrost, I've now applied to Boulder, and I worked much more slowly and sort of took the time to savor each sentence while I was translating. Whereas last time I was trying to get a quick draft and then work it line by line.
Okay. Interesting, very interesting. And now that we have discussed about the form of the text, I'd like you to read some excerpts of the novel in Catalan and in English. So the first one, Eva, you're going to read in Catalan, and then Julia in English, and we are going to read the first paragraph of the third chapter.
Sí. Mesures de seguretat a tot arreu, més que persones, més que rates. Mesures reproduïdes sense cap lògica ni sentit. Mesures de seguretat concretades en baranes, vidres dobles antibales, senyals de prohibit el pas, cinturons, barreres, cascos, botons. Mesures actives i passives, tant se val. Poden ser genolleres, terres de goma escuma, cremalleres, condons, antiavalots, futbol. També medicació, subsidis d'atur, mesures evidents o subtils, frens electromagnètics, presons, banderoles, programes d'integració social, vestides, vàlvules, revestiments ignífugs, arnesos i mosquetons. I altra vegada medicació, gorres de cop, acompanyants, productes descremats. Medicació, medicació i medicació. Un suïcida reeixit avui en dia és un heroi. El món és ple de desaprensius titulats en primers auxilis. Són arreu, discrets i grisos com femelles de colom, però agressius com mares. Desafien la mort dels altres amb els seus massatges cardíacs i maniobres precises de Heimlich. Són una colla de lladres, Una ja no pot ni endinyar-se un pinyol d'oliva pel tub equivocat, que el faran escopir per la força, encara que t'hagin de partir les costelles i perforar un pulmó. Tot a tu feta un vòmit de dry martini i el pinyol d'oliva projectat com un trofeu cap un racó. Morir en un racó estaria bé. Hauria de ser possible llogar racons on vam morir, sense interferències, sense bombones d'oxigen autopropulsades despenjant-se per sorpresa sobre teu, just al darrer moment, on les mesures de seguretat et t'asseguressin una mort com cal.
Now English.
Safety precautions all over the place. More than people, more than rats. Precautions enacted without rhyme or reason. Safety precautions in the form of guardrails, bulletproof windows, no trespassing signs, seat belts, helmets, alarm buttons, and blockades. Precautions that are active or passive, whatever. Knee pads, for example, or foam floor tiles, zippers, condoms, riot police, and football. Unemployment benefits and medication. Precautions that are subtle or obvious. Electromagnetic brakes, prisons, banners, social integration initiatives, scaffolding, valves, fireproof cladding, harnesses, and carabiners. And again, medication, hard hats, 2% milk, medication, medication, and medication. A successful suicide these days is heroic. The world is full of unscrupulous people certified in first aid. They're everywhere, gray and unassuming like female pigeons, but aggressive like mothers. They foil death with cardiac massages and careful Heimlich maneuvers. They're a pack of thieves. You can't even ram an olive down the wrong tube without them forcing you to spit it out, even if they break your ribs or puncture lungs in the process. And there you are, covered in dry martini puke, the olive pit hurled like a trophy at a corner of the room. I wouldn't mind dying in a corner. It should be possible to rent corners for dying in peace, without interference or self-activated oxygen tanks dropping down at you at the very last moment. Corners where safety precautions guarantee, where they assure you a proper death.
Okay. And do you have a second?
Oh,
well,
we're
I
going
don't
straight to the
know.
second.
Yeah, we can wait until the very end, maybe.
Oh, now it's up to you
Okay.
now.
Yeah. We start with English and then with Catalan. We're going to read the first part of the 9th chapter.
The 9th chapter.
Yeah.
Cardrona, Scotland. I had always thought the world's smallest towns sat deserted at the tops of tall mountain ranges. I was wrong. Cardrona is microscopic, a cluster of modest houses and an infinite golf course, like the mound of dirt that signals an anthill in a bare field. Despite what movies would have you believe, small towns are boring. It's just about impossible to meet anyone interesting. My host family's house has 2 floors and a garden rendered useless by fine, unrelenting rain. What matters is that 2 children live here, a boy and a girl. They're pale, dumpy, and soft. Their mother, like all respectable Scottish mothers, is named Fiona. Fiona works in sales for a pharmaceutical company, so she spends a lot of the year traveling. Their father isn't in the picture. Giovanna was right. All I do is take the kids to school and some light dusting with the duster. The rest of the time I read in my room. In it is a single bed with a solid wooden headboard and a patchwork quilt that's hideous but appropriate. There's also a small desk on top of which sat an empty picture frame when I first arrived. The sight of it made me think of Mom, so now it lives in a drawer. The window is large and U-shaped. The scenery is breathtaking, like a tinted seascape. Outside are fields as far as the eye can see, carpeted in emerald hay that heaves like a lung. If I stare at them long enough, I begin to feel an unsettling lack of salinity. By the window, when I sit on it, I feel like Scarlett O'Hara, but it's a good refuge from the excessive heating. I start a new book every 2 days, and within a week, I've already worked my way through the ones I brought with me. My initial, perfectly realistic estimate had been of a month. Cardrona surpasses my every expectation. I soon find myself wishing the kids would never grow up. All I want to be is a lifelong au pair, and I have curious impulses, like the urge to withhold their food. Frail children physically remain children for longer, though some abuse has also been known to accelerate emotional maturity. My chances of success are slim, but it's worth a shot. I spend hours daydreaming about accidents that involve the staircase and about the possibility of one of the siblings becoming paralyzed, maybe the girl. A man who is crippled is statistically more likely to find a partner than a woman in the same situation. I'm sure that if the girl were to become paralyzed, Fiona wouldn't hesitate to hire a competent au pair on an indefinite basis.
Cardrona, Escòcia. Sempre havia cregut que els pobles més petits del món es trobaven abandonats dalt de grans serralades. Estava equivocada. Cardrona és microbià, una discreta acumulació de casetes en un camp de golf il·limitat, com la mica de sorreta amuntegada que indica la presència d'un formiguer en un descampat. Els indrets petits són avorrits, no com a les pel·lícules. És pràcticament impossible trobar-hi un veí interessant. La casa de la meva família d'acollida té 2 plantes i un jardinet inutilitzat per una pluja fina i constant. El més important és que hi viuen 2 infants, un nen i una nena. Són blancs, rodanxons i tubets. La mare es diu Fiona, com tota bona mare escocesa, i treballa de comercial en una empresa farmacèutica, cosa que l'obliga a viatjar bona part de l'any. El pare és absent. Realment, la Giovanna tenia raó. Només he d'acompanyar els nens a l'escola i treure una mica la pols amb el plomall. La resta del dia me la passo llegint a la meva habitació. Hi ha un llit individual amb capçal de fusta massissa i una màrfaga de patchwork a sobre. Horrible, però escaient. També hi ha un escriptori petit que quan vaig arribar tenia un portarretrats buit al damunt. Mirar-lo em feia pensar en la mama, així que ara és el calaix. La finestra és gran i té forma d'U. El paisatge és increïble, és com tenir vistes al mar, però en una tonalitat diferent. A fora només hi ha camps, coberts d'una mena de fenc maragda que es mou com un pulmó, estesa d'ulls. Si me'ls quedo mirant una estona, tinc una sensació incòmoda, de manca, de celebró. Davant de la finestra, encaixat just al clot de la U, hi ha un seient amb un estampat de flors. Seure allí em fa sentir com Scarlett O'Hara. Però és un bon lloc contra l'excés de calefacció. Començo un llibre nou cada 2 dies, de manera que al cap d'una setmana d'haver arribat ja he exhaurit tots els que han viatjat amb mi. I això que la previsió inicial, força realista, era d'1 mes. Realment, Cardrona supera totes les meves expectatives i ben aviat acabo desitjant que els nens no creixin mai. Necessito ser una au pair vitalícia i tinc pensaments curiosos, com ara escatimar-los al menjar. Els infants raquítics són físicament infants durant més temps, encara que certs abusos actuïn com a acceleradors de la maduració emocional. Per poc que pogués funcionar, pagaria la pena intentar-ho. També penso sovint en tota mena d'accidents provocats a l'escala, en la possible paràlisi d'un dels 2 germans. Potser la nena. Les estadístiques asseguren que els homes paralítics troben parella més fàcilment que les dones en la mateixa situació. Estic segura que si la nena quedés impossibilitada, la Fiona no tindria cap inconvenient a contractar indefinidament un au pair competent.
Okay, thank you very much. Moltes gràcies. Okay, so with these 2 excerpts, I think we heard the voice of the protagonist. And I'd like to ask you about the protagonist of the novel, to both of you. Obviously, Eva Baltasar as the mother of this protagonist and Julia as the translator of this voice. So I've read some reviews that some people who do not like Permafrost, not a lot, but they think the protagonist is cynical and that they cannot connect or relate to her. So I'd like to ask Eva and Julia, what is your relationship with this protagonist and how do you see her? Like, do you like her or what?
I love her. Sí, es algo que no me ocurre con Boulder. Por ejemplo, Boulder es una protagonista a la que quiero muchísimo, pero que me problematiza. Pero yo entiendo muchísimo a la protagonista de Permafrost. Me he identificado, me ha sido muy fácil identificarme con ella. Sí es cierto que hay esa voz cínica que para mí, o irónica, es que depende la etiqueta que quieres ponerle, ¿no? Pero esa mirada esa mirada irónica que es una herramienta de supervivencia. Ella lo necesita, esa mirada, realmente para no suicidarse cada 4 páginas, ¿no? Entonces yo he empatizado muchísimo con ella y me da ternura el hecho de que necesite esa voz cínica que puede parecer muy distante, muy dura, para realmente hacer frente a algo mucho más duro que ella, que es la sociedad en la que está, los personajes con los que se encuentra, el montaje que hemos hecho. No sé tú.
Well, yeah, let me translate and then we go back to Julia. With Balder, for example, the relationship, I mean, she likes the protagonist, but she creates some, problems. It's problematizing the protagonist of Balder. But on the contrary, the protagonist in Permagel, she identifies a lot with the protagonist in Permagel, Permafrost, because she has this ironical side, which is basically a tool of survival, sorry. So without this way of like cynism and irony, she would be, she would commit suicide every 3 pages. So she sees with a lot of tenderness this need for this, I'd say, this sharp and harsh voice to kind of face all the society and all the characters that surround the protagonist in Permafrost. And now, Julia, what do you think?
So I'm remembering now that you referred to Eva as the mother of the book. And recently I was talking to my partner about, I think it was Permafrost, and how nervous I was for it to be out in English. And he was like, that's normal. You're the stepmother of the book. So I've decided to place myself in that relationship with the text. But I would say that the world is cynical rather than the protagonist. I'm also cynical, so I found myself very at home in her company. I think humor is a very good way to deal with a sometimes dark world. It's also another survival method, aside from, I'm not sure. Sometimes I've had people accuse me of being cynical, and I just say, I'm a realist. I'm not cynical at all. And I guess I see that a little bit. I mean, I've mentioned this before, and I don't mean to harp on about it, but being a woman in the modern world is hard. There's no winning. If you choose not to have children, you're doing something wrong. If you choose to have children, you're doing something wrong. Her voice feels right to me, and the way she positions herself in the world feels comforting, because we don't have that many examples of female protagonists like this out in literature. There's also, for those who don't like her, I would say there's something really revolutionary about having unlikable female protagonists, because that's something else that is problematic. Sometimes people are like, but I want to, have a kind-hearted and generous and loving and blah, blah, blah woman in this book or in this movie. But what if we have a cynical and not particularly nice and not always empathetic character as the protagonist? That's also interesting. That's it.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. We are running out of time, but I really want to finish with a question that I really want to ask to both Eva and Julia, which is about the sexual dimension of the novel. I've read in a review by Elizabeth Duval, who's quite popular right now, and she says she doesn't like the way sexuality is expressed in the book, as in she describes it as very conservative and masculine manner, the way the protagonist is reading and looking at the lovers, right? According to her, there's only this shift from gender in the narrator, so it's it's always like a masculine way of doing that, but the only thing that changes is that she is a woman instead of a man. So what do you think about that, Eva? How do you write, you know, this relationship, sexual, yeah, the relationship with the lovers?
¿Puedes traducir la pregunta?
Sí, que es descriu com molt conservadora i masculina aquesta mirada que té la protagonista respecte a les seves amants, segons aquesta crítica. Però, per exemple, jo no ho vaig pensar. Tu què en penses? Com ho escrius?
Sí. Creo que el libro es el mismo libro para todos, ¿no? Hay el libro que yo he escrito, luego hay desde donde yo lo he escrito, como quién soy yo, hija de mi época, nacida tal año, y luego hay una segunda burbuja de novela que yo tengo en la cabeza mientras escribo y no está en la novela. Luego el libro llega a lectores y lectoras de edades muy distintas, he encontrado lectores de 15 años hasta de casi 100, ¿no? Y ahí cada cual le resuena de una forma distinta. Entonces es cierto que hay esta crítica y también hay la crítica contraria, que a mí me ha llegado más, pero bueno, es que es igual. Yo creo que ahí sí que cada cual llena esa segunda burbuja con sus propias proyecciones, con sus análisis, que todos son válidos. Y es lo bonito de la literatura, es que llegue de formas tan distintas. Yo te diría, lo comparto. Esta crítica de Elisabeth Tubau la entiendo, yo no la comparto, pero es evidente que puedo entenderla y creo que enriquece mucho al libro y enriquece mucho la lectura. Comparto más otras con las que yo me identifico más, pero es evidente que un libro, esa es la magia, ¿no? Precisamente que llega de formas tan distintas. Yo lo encuentro precioso y agradezco todas las críticas, evidentemente.
Okay, so obviously the novel is the same one that reaches everyone or the audience, and obviously there are these intrinsic things to the novel, which is from where she is writing the novel, in which when was she born and who is she as a person. But there's another dimension which is not in the novel. It is this bubble that each of us feels in with our own baggage and story, right? So she tells us that she has like readers very, very young, like 15 years old to almost 100 years old, right? So that's the nice thing of literature, that each of us applies this different filter to the same text. So if she understands that critics, she says yes, but maybe she shares, you know, she agrees with other ones that are more, you know, so more related to her. But she thanks all the reviews and comments about the novel, because I think that's very, well, she thinks that's very enriching. And I'd like to know your opinion about that, Julia, as well.
So when you first told us about this question, I went out and obviously I found the review and I read it. And I think this is when my partner said, it's understandable you'd be upset about this. You're the stepmother of the book. And I think, again, I agree with Eva, every new review, every new reading just expands the sort of what the book is. I mean, the book is less the words on the page as it is everyone's reading of it. And the more diverse readings, the more interesting I think the work becomes. But I also think she conflated the two protagonists, like she was talking about Boulder and Permafrost at the same time. And I think that the two protagonists are doing different things when they think of sex. She was quoting from the Spanish edition, and she was talking about how in Boulder the Boulder is always saying me la follo, like I fuck her, rather than we have sex or whatever. And I think possibly because I knew about the protagonist of Boulder before I even read the book, because I asked Eva about it and she told me the perspective, and she said I was trying to write a female character who's looking at this sort of process of conception and child rearing and birth through a male perspective. And I think that, not to give too much away in Boulder, but that's a really interesting take on maternity, because people expect, again, expectations in women, people expect women to be mothers in very particular ways, but there are like a million different ways to be a mother. And there are a million different ways to be a woman, even if sometimes that's having a slightly more male perspective of a male perspective of a sexual encounter. But yeah, I think that where the review lost me is where she sort of takes the protagonist of Permafrost and the protagonist of Boulder and makes them one person because they were created by one person, but they feel very different to me.
Yeah.
I really, I've said this before, but I loved the way that bodies and sex was written about in Permafrost. It was playful, and the descriptions of the women's bodies was beautiful, but also strange, and not romanticized or sexualized in the way that they have been in literature in the past by men. So that's my defensive take on that question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I mean, I read it and I was also a little bit shocked because I liked it a lot. I loved it, the way these sexual relationships and sexual desires are expressed in both novels, to be honest. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stop my questions here and I open the floor to the audience. So do you have any questions in the audience?
Gonzalo, we have a couple of questions in the chat box.
Ah, okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right. Yeah, sorry, I'm seeing it now. Okay, so there's a question for Julia. Do you think that a literary translator or a poetry translator has to be a writer and a poet first?
No. I mean, I'm not a writer. I mean, I used to write poetry, but I wouldn't recommend anyone read it. It was very bad. And I'd say that I'm an okay translator at least. And there are poets, I haven't figured out yet what makes a translator a good translator. And also I think it's a matter of terms as well. Translators do more than just translate, and writers do more than just write. So I think I can carry across very well what is in another language into English, or another language I read and write and speak into English, but I can't create in the same way that Eva creates. And it's very possible that even if Eva spoke 2 languages very well, she wouldn't be able to translate in the same way. There's also one thing that's very important in both of these different professions is the desire to do it. I don't have the desire to write poetry. I have the desire to translate poetry and translate prose. And it's very possible that Eva is the same way, that she doesn't have the desire to translate. She has the desire to create poetry and prose.
Okay, I like it. I mean, I do agree as a translator as well. So thank you very much for the answer. Then we have a question. I think Paloma Merino wants to ask something.
Yes, hello. First of all, congratulations to the author and the translator. And my question is, for you both, do you consider Permafrost a feminist novel? I mean, is there some sort of feminist or LGBTQ activism behind it? Thank you.
Gonzalo, la primera pregunta la entendí, ¿no? Si consideramos que es una novela feminista, y la segunda, perdona.
Que si hi ha algun tipus d'activisme feminista o LGTB darrere, alguna intenció. Sí.
Claro, no, yo respondería claramente, yo no escribo con ninguna intención, pero me veo a mí misma como un síntoma de mi época. Es decir, yo me cuesta mucho colgar etiquetas a las novelas, ¿no? Feministas, sea LGTBI, lo que sea, Es una novela donde la protagonista es mujer porque yo me siento mujer ahora mismo, es lesbiana porque ahora mismo me siento lesbiana y el tema de la novela no es este porque pues detrás mío sí que ha habido muchas mujeres y hombres que han luchado para que yo pueda vivir mi vida y mi sexualidad de forma totalmente normalizada y sin tener ningún problema. Entonces veo que esto también, este libro, por ejemplo, Permafrost, es un síntoma de esto y por sí mismo, si quieres, ya normalizado, ya forma parte de la literatura ya normalizada, donde esto ya no es un tema. Yo creo que la gracia precisamente es que no sea un tema, ni feminista ni lo que sea.
Okay, thank you. There's no, I mean, she doesn't write with any intention behind that, and she's just a symptom of her you know, time. And in the novel, the protagonist is a woman because she feels a woman right now, and she's a lesbian because she feels a lesbian right now. But behind her, there are all these people who have fought for, you know, the for being able to carry a normal life, being a woman and a lesbian, right? So Permafrost is kind of a symptom of that. And it has this intention of belonging to a normative, something that is normal, right? So it shouldn't be a topic anymore, the being a woman or being LGBTQ, right? And Julia?
I don't know if I have anything to add. I think that sort of encapsulates how I feel about it.
Okay, great. No disagreement in here.